Start.
You can start.
Hey. Hello, everybody. My name is Raymond Willemse. I am a journalist at Netwerk 24 in South Africa, based in Johannesburg. Born and bred in Stellenbosch, but I moved to Johannesburg back in 2018. I want to thank the Zuid-Afrikahuis for their hospitality since I've been here in Amsterdam. It has really been an honor, an eye-opening, and I truly fell in love with this place. I've still here a few weeks, so I'm going to visit as much as I can to experience this wonderful place. I must say, you're very lucky and privileged to be able to stay in a place like this. Um, I'm a political journalist, and I'm going to talk about South Africa's foreign policy. As you know, we had elections in May, and the outcome of the election was that no political party won the election with an outright majority. So what happened then is the ANC that has been in charge for more than 30 years, they needed to find political parties to work with them and to form a government. I understand you in the Netherlands also know about coalition governments, as you are also part of coalition governments. But I think what made South Africa unique was we formed a government in 14 days. And I understand here in Europe, it takes much more longer to form a government. So it was weird, that in South Africa, that political parties from that one would say are left and right, that they somehow founded each other to work together. So, starting with the with the foreign policy, so South Africa's foreign policy was formed based on the ANC's policies. The ANC has been in charge since 1994, and their policies became the policies of the country, whether it's domestic or foreign. So the ANC's foreign policy is informed by the Freedom Charter, which states that there shall be peace and friendship, a world respectful of national sovereignty and dedicated to peace. It emphasizes a commitment to Africa's development, breaking free from colonial legacies and promoting international solidarity. It is also rooted in liberation solidarity. Former President Nelson Mandela once said to US President Bill Clinton that South Africa would not abandon those who supported their liberation struggle during the darkest hours of apartheid. And some of the liberation movements, one can say, was the Soviet Union, ZANU-PF, neighboring in Zimbabwe, um, Angola, Frelimo in Mozambique, and also Namibia. So especially your southern countries, and Cuba and Palestine was also one of those liberation movements which the ANC still views today as their friends. Can you just play that video? I just want you guys just to understand South Africa's foreign policy.
One of the first heads of state I invited to this country was Fidel Castro. I have received in this country ex-President Rafsanjani of Iran. I have also invited brother leader Gaddafi to this country. And I do that because our moral authority dictates that we should not abandon those who helped us in the darkest hour in the history of this country. And those South Africans who have berated me for being loyal to our friends, literally they can go and throw themselves into a pool.
although he said, Mr. Mandela said that they can jump in the pool, I assume he also that said that to the West, that the Western countries cannot dictate South Africa of who their friends are. And in essence, he told Bill Clinton, who was the mightiest president at the time, he can jump technically in a pool because South Africa will not be dictated to who their friends are. So because the ANC's foreign policy is also underpinned by two principles, namely Pan-Africanism and anti-imperialism. In the context of the struggle against apartheid and colonialism, these principles evolved during different stages of the struggle and shaped South Africa's policy in the democratic era. So after apartheid, the ANC came into government, and South Africa saw the ANC-led government at that time saw themselves as the champion of human rights and international law because of what the ANC, what the country went through with apartheid. And after apartheid, while also South Africa seen as a champion of human rights, different groups were brought together, the oppressor and those who were oppressed, and somehow they came together to rebuild the country. The ANC also view international relations as a key platform to advance and create a better world for all its citizens. So that the ANC-led government, they believe they have a moral obligation to stand up for justice and fundamental human rights for all people. It is this obligation that informed the ANC-led government application to the ICJ in 2023, where it took Israel to The Hague, as you all know about that. ANC has strong relations with Moscow, which one can say the Soviet Union, when it was the Soviet Union before the fall of the Berlin Wall. And this dates back to the Cold War, when the Soviet Union supported the ANC's anti-apartheid struggle. And during the Cold War, Washington said that the ANC is a terrorist organization and refused to impose sanctions against the apartheid government. And I think they only imposed sanctions against the South African apartheid government in the late 1980s. So what also learned what Mr. Mandela said is the ANC believe that the Soviet Union trained them and prepared them for government, and they won't turn their back on their friends. They also, as I mentioned before, they won't be dictated to who their friends are. And during the 30 years since the ANC has been in government, South Africa has become a voice of Africa and the global side, especially during the pandemic, advocating for a just world. And they also, the ANC also believe, in a sense, that they are non-aligned, and the non-alignment was tested during the war between the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. People criticize, especially in our country, also the political parties. They criticize the ANC government because they didn't condemn Russia for what happened with Ukraine, invading Ukraine, and they said nothing. But when 7 October 2023 happened between Israel and Palestine, South Africa was very vocal, and they took a stand. And I think for me that was the only time when they weren't non-aligned. But one must understand that the ANC said we cannot be free until Palestine is free. So that has been a stance from them from since they took office in 1994. Yeah, and I also mentioned that they also want to build a peaceful world, and they also have peaceful religion. And with conflicts, they don't believe with conflicts that it can be resolved with violence. They believe because with the party, what we did was they sat around the table and they sorted the conflict out and to better the country, and they didn't have to go to war. So during the ANC's in 30 years, especially in the last few years, the DA, which was the main opposition, which is more liberal and more aligned to the West. The ANC government has, the DA has criticized the ANC government on its approach to conflicts in the region, including the situation in Zimbabwe. I know a few years ago when Zimbabwe technically lost the elections, but vote rigging was happening there. So, and the ANC government then, I think it was under Thabo Mbeki, they wasn't vocal enough to hold Zimbabwe to account. And, and also with the previous election last year in Zimbabwe, where there was seemed that the voting wasn't fair, South Africa, the government actually congratulated them, they form a liberation movement. And the ANC have also been accused of attaching this significance to political solidarity and fraternal relations with the former liberation movement, other than um, movements and promoting the protection of human rights. So people want them, if they're gonna promote human rights, they must be fair in how they apply it. And the government was heavily attacked on its failure to arrest the former president of Sudan, Omar al-Bashir, when he visited South Africa. And as you know, he was indicted by the ICJ, and South Africa allowed the then government of the government allowed him to come into South Africa and leave South Africa, even though there was a an arrest warrant for him. And last year, something similar also happened when South Africa was hosting the BRICS summit in 2023. So the DA took the government to court, um, and they said if Vladimir Putin is going to set his foot in South Africa, they must arrest him. So in 2024, something interesting happened, as I mentioned before. So the ANC lost power, and we also seen it as the liberation movement. They lost power, and we also see a lot of liberation movements in Southern Africa, Botswana. The liberation movement, they lost power recently. We don't know what's happening in Namibia. There's a lot of questions regarding if the elections was fair. Mozambique, the same. So it's interesting thing to see what's happening with liberation movements losing power in Southern Africa. So the ANC lost power, and we saw the formation of the Government of National Unity. This new political reality could have far-reaching implications for the country's international relations over the next 5 years. The coalition dynamics bring together divergent foreign policy perspectives between the two biggest GNU partners, the ANC and the DA. The ANC focuses global south, BRICS, and a multipolarity world. The DA is Western aligned, trade focused. They're very critical of Russia and Iran. Back in 2023, when Iran and Saudi Arabia joined the BRICS nation, the DA said it's an unholy alliance because they feel like those two countries don't adhere to human rights laws. So when the political parties formed the GNU, they signed a statement of intent. And in the statement of intent, there's only one mention of foreign policy. And it said here that foreign policy based on human rights, constitutionalism, the national interest, solidarity, peaceful resolution of conflicts to achieve the African Agenda 2063, South-South, North-South, and African cooperation, multilateralism, and a just, peaceful, and equitable world. During the negotiations, the ANC was adamant that they want the ministerial post for international affairs, and that went to Ronald Lamola, was the former minister for justice, and the two deputy ministers for international affairs are also part of the ANC group of the ANC party. So the differences in the foreign policy between the ANC and the DA is The foreign policy has been a contentious issue in the GNU, with the DA criticizing the GNU partner, the ANC, for taking decisions without consulting other partners. At the recent summit in Russia, President Ramaphosa said to Vladimir Putin that Russia is a valued ally and friend. Now, then, John Steenhuisen, he is the leader of the DA and is also Minister of Agriculture in Ramaphosa's cabinet. So he criticized, in effect, his boss on his stance between Russia and South Africa. Steenhuisen said to Ramaphosa, Putin is your ally, Mr. President, not South Africa's. One might think that although it seems like he criticizes his boss, you must also understand that he is the leader of a party. So he also has a responsibility to his voters and to his party supporters, because the DA doesn't view Russia as an economic ally, because trade between those two countries is not that great. And during that negotiation between the GNU, the ANC strongly believes that foreign affairs for them is a red line. It's non-negotiable, and they won't change it to pander to a Western agenda. The ANC and the DA also have different views on the conflict in Ukraine and Gaza. The DAs have the view that the government is inconsistent with its foreign policy, as the government refused to condemn Russia's invasion into Ukraine. The DA leader even went to John Steenhuisen even went to Ukraine to assess the situation then, and the DA, and they also removed one of the MPs from a position because of his pro-Palestinian position. So for the DA and the ANC, they want to see the economy work, and they believe that foreign policy can play an important role in growing the economy that has been stagnant for years now. The DA, although the DA is critical of Iran and Russia and some of the other rogue countries, they are supporter of the BRICS. So they said that they would support BRICS, and they have the view that the ANC's close relationship with Russia can have an impact on the country's economy and growth. As we know, in 2023, last year, the US tried to influence South Africa's stance on the Ukraine-Russia matter, and the outgoing ambassador, Ruben Bigot, he said that South Africa sold weapons to Russia, and I think that made worldwide headlines, and also had an impact on the rand's value. He said that he had evidence, but he never produced it. And also, currently, in US lawmakers, they want to review South Africa's relations regarding AGOA. And they are not happy that South Africa took Israel to the ICJ. And they also cite the reasons for South Africa's history siding with malign actors, as they said. And as you can see, there is so why the DA doesn't understand the close relationship between this Russia is that if you see the trade between Russia and South Africa, it's vastly different. It's more, we do have more trade with the USA than with Russia, so it's not that's economic sense for South Africa to to the ANC government to have that close relationship with Russia and then be critical a of the US, which is a big trading partner. South Africa, something important happened yesterday, the 1st of December. So South Africa took over the chairmanship of the G20, and next year it will be held in South Africa. This is a first for Africa. We are the first country that will host it. South Africa also had a few firsts, being the first to hold the FIFA World Cup and also other major events. I think that was in 2010 years. So with the G20, the DA submitted a letter last week to Ramaphosa, and they seek to have a louder voice regarding South Africa's policy, foreign policy. They want there's an interstitial committee that's been constituted between the DA and the ANC and some of the other GNU partners to formulate a policy. They want that grouping to formulate the foreign policy of South Africa. So they have the view that a group of 10 members must become South Africa's foreign policy engine. But South Africa's foreign policy position remains the prerogative, according to the constitution, of the president, with the assistance of International Relations and Cooperation Minister Lamola. Minister Lamola is responsible for the formulation, promotion, and execution of South Africa's foreign policy. Ramaphosa also said that South Africa's foreign policy will remain unchanged over the weekend. So, although the DA wants a louder voice in the foreign policy, it looks like that's not going to happen, as the ANC is very strict that they would not change their forest policy direction, and they also feel like the constitution guides the president on the foreign policy and not a political party. So, what lies ahead for the GNU? With a GNU made up of different political parties, there will be different views about what kind of foreign policy the government will follow. The challenge of decision making by consensus may see South Africa adopting a more might adopt a more middle of the road policy on pressing global challenges. The government should also prioritize economic benefits for the country over historical ties. And I'd assume that the focus will be on multilateralism and a just, peaceful, and equitable world, because Ramaphosa on all of the stages that he's been out talking about South African foreign policy, he talked about a just, peaceful, and equitable world, because it feels like um, the multilateral institutions like the UN Security Council and the international institutions, they're still being run by the Western countries, and Africa doesn't seem to have a voice in those arenas. So having one message on foreign policy for South Africa is vital. If the DNU doesn't present a united front on pressing global developments, political opposition forces and parties in South Africa could easily attack and undermine the country's international relations. With South Africa assuming the G20 chairmanship, the country can put on an agenda issues that are important to South Africa and Africa. And Ramaphosa had said economic growth, development, and food security are important priorities, and the reform of international institutions and multilateral institutions. And something also interesting that happened over the weekend was when the president-elect Donald Trump said that the BRICS countries that are trying to move away from the dollar while we stand behind what is over. We require commitment from these countries. They will neither create a new BRICS currency and nor back any currency to replace the mighty US dollar. So, in a sense, also for the ANCs, that they feel like rhetoric like that is willing tactics to influence a country's sovereign foreign policy. So, it's interesting what will happen, because the opposition parties like the DA said that South Africa's close ties with Russia and the other countries might have an impact on the foreign policy and also the economic outlook. And with the over the few days when the different political parties will come together to speak about the G20 and what position they will take, it will be interesting to see what will come out of that, and if the ANC would change the foreign policy direction, if it will stay the same. But one can assume that the DA will want to try to influence what South Africa's foreign policy outlook will be like. Thank you. That's for me.
Is Fuller. First of all, thank you very much for your talk. Does the DA internally have any bargaining power to do a trade-off, in the sense that they want to pursue the more liberal foreign policy, do they have any bargaining power internally in terms of something they can trade off? If you understand my question.
Yeah. Because how it works like foreign policy is also in cabinet. Cabinet also makes decisions, and within the cabinet you have the DA, the ANC, the IFP, the PA, and the Freedom Front Plus, and there's another party I forget. It's also in there. But the Freedom Plus and the DA, it's somehow the same foreign policy, and different to that of the ANC. The thing is, if a decision is made in cabinet, that's cabinet's decision. You cannot, as a DA, John Steenhuisen as the DA leader, cannot say something differently because cabinet's decisions are cabinet decisions.
Yeah.
And you need to speak out of one voice. What can happen is the party, Helen Zeller, which is the federal chairperson of the ANC, was like a secretary general of the, excuse me,
DA.
of the DA, see somehow can say something about it. And you also have a parliamentary process where, because the ANC doesn't have that majority anymore, so now they have to work with the DA and the other partners of the GNU because they need a more than 60% or more than 50% for decisions in parliament to go through. Some of the decisions, and some of them are more than two-thirds. I don't think they have a bargaining chip because the ANC are very steadfast that they would not nudge on foreign policy. Does one see the DA walking away? I don't know, because the thing is, whoever walks away and things fall apart, that party would be blamed.
Yeah.
Because some will see that this is something insignificant to walk away from. And we're also seeing that with the whole Bella thing. So it's difficult to say what's going to happen, but what can also happen is there's also a clearinghouse mechanism within the GNU. So they need consensus of 60% plus. So the ANC with their 40 might go a different route, and the other GNU partners, which comes to 60%, they might say we're going this direction. But it's different. They don't have enough strong voice to change the policy direction.
Clear. Thank you very much. May I ask another question, or does anyone else have a question? Now, the West is also trying to reimagine itself and its relation with Africa as a continent. I believe it was last year that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in the Netherlands came with an Africa strategy. How do you assess the way in which the West should approach the continent of Africa through a sort of decolonialized manner? It's a big question, I understand. Do you have any advice, or do you have any insight from your perspective?
West is when they come to Africa, they come with already a set of principles. And some African countries see that as enforcing on their sovereignty. So there must be human rights, there must be this and this and this. Whereas Russia and China, they don't come with that baggage. They just want to trade, and they don't care whatever happens. Where the West is say, oh, we believe in democracy, you must democratize and everything. So I don't see that the West would walk away from their principles, meaning democracy, human rights, and all those other things. But there needs to be an Africa strategy, because Africa is a growing economy. It's almost a billion people now, and it's a young population.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the world would need that. So I don't. It's difficult how the West will work, because the Africa doesn't trust the West, because they will side with their friends and they won't care about Africa, and also with Russia and China. Although one can criticize, their motives, they have, in a sense, always been there supporting them, and they don't interfere in the internal affairs of the country. Whereas the West, as we've seen, once always seems to have done that, whether it was Libya and some other countries that they want to impose.
Yeah, with conditions. Yeah. Would you like to ask questions?
Yeah, thank you so much for your talk. To start with, it's very interesting. I'm a bit a follow-up question about the West because on the trade balance you saw that China is a country. There's a lot of import from China. There's a lot of export to China, and you just said like, well, they don't pose any conditions on these concepts. But can we dive a little bit deeper in that? I mean, is that true, or are there things happening that China does want certain things or gives out loans that need to be paid back? Things that can you look a bit deeper into the relation between South Africa and China?
Is when they come to countries. So what I've noticed is they will also bring their own people in. And I think some of the citizens that are uneasy about that because they want work opportunities, but I think the top work opportunities goes to Chinese officials. But China, what China is they want how they need minerals, and Africa has a lot of them. And some people feel that Africa is being exploited for the minerals. Whereas if you, the politicians and the wealthy and the rich, they get the benefits, whereas the majority of the people still lives in poverty. And yeah, China, they don't, they, like I said, they don't care about, the internal politics. They just want what they're there for. So they invest. And as you mentioned, also now they're giving funding or loans. So those loans needs to be paid. The thing with why the states are taking those loans because it doesn't come with conditions for democracy and all the other things. And they see it's a better deal for them than to work with the West.
Then indeed another follow-up on the follow-up. Um, um, is it not a missed opportunity that we are um, exporting a lot of the raw materials? And is there not an opportunity to produce something from the raw materials? If we look at China, they are, I believe it's by plus 90% market leader when it comes to solar panels. That's become an export product of theirs. Many of the minerals are from African or South African mines. Is there not an opportunity for Africa to capitalize on the wealth that we have under the ground? Yeah.
The youth think they are very vocal that we shouldn't export our raw materials anymore. We can, but the thing is, they want the, the products to be made and finished in South Africa, and then we must export it because then the benefit for us is it's bigger. So now you're exporting your raw materials, you buy it back for double the price. So it's a missed opportunity, and I don't know how the government will fix this because we have a lot of raw materials, and if we produce the products ourselves and export the final product, then I think we will be better off.
Yeah. Do you-
But the EU won't import those finished products because they want to make their own finished products, and this is how difficult it is then for South Africa to move on that because lots of trade blocks, Western trade blocks, are protecting their own markets, so they don't want finished products. They just want the basics.
Don't know how it's going to impact tariffs. So that's also that's for the EU and for even Canada and the US as neighbors. So for China, so it will be an interesting thing in starting next year. Yeah, that must be key.
All right. Right. That's it. And thank you again.
Thank you.